Parliament. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Lord, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness hast appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us, thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in these islands. That thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and those whose interest thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Morning, members. The House is now in session. Thank you. Ms. Clark, you ready? Good. Members, before we start, I'm going to do two pieces. First, one, we're going to acknowledge that we have present with us in our gallery this morning, the head led by the delegation of Minister Mitchell, a delegation from Bahamas who are here participating in the celebrations that Bermuda will be doing, honoring their anniversary year and a significant anniversary year of their independence. So we welcome Minister Mitchell, who is the Minister of Home Affairs. We welcome you and your delegation to be present with us this morning. The other Madam members are going to ask you to rise to your feet again. As customary, when one of our former members have passed, we take that moment of silence to recognize that member. And as we all know, we're here after the recent burial and passing of our brother Artie Simmons, and it would just actually all join us in a moment of silence. So, 1 sec. Okay, moment of silence. Thank you, members. We can be seated. Members, the minutes of the June 16th sitting have been circulated. Are there any amendments required? The none. The minutes will be printed as confirmed as printed. Sorry. Messages from the governor. There are none. Announcements by the speaker. We received communication from the following members of the absence today. MP Wade and MP Caesar have both indicated that they'll be absent. I also have the Ombudsman's report, annual report for 2022. This report has been submitted to me in compliance with Section 24(1) and 3 of the Ombudsman Act 2004. Messages from the Senate. There are none. Papers and other communications. We have two this morning. First is in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister,
Good morning, Mr.
good
Speaker.
morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly, the Bermuda Hospitals Board Annual Report 2020.
Thank you. The second is in the name of the Minister of Social Development and Seniors. Minister,
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly, the Human Rights Commission 2022 Annual Report.
Thank you. Petitions, there are none. Statements by ministers and junior ministers. We have 3 statements this morning. The first is in the name of the Premier. Premier, would you like to present your statement?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
It's good to have you back.
Okay, good to be back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share the outcome of successful negotiations with the government's largest union partners. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, recall that the government of Bermuda has 7 collective bargaining agreements and/or instruments that set out conditions of employment with 6 union partners or associations representing around 4,400 or so public officers. Most agreements expired in 2020 and included a survival provision. Negotiations commenced in 2022 with all partners except for the Bermuda Police Association. Mr. Speaker, the government modified its approach to these negotiations and moved away from a dedicated public sector negotiating team that consisted exclusively of private sector representatives to advance its interests and instead instituted a hybrid approach. That is, the government appointed private sector chairs to represent its interests and teamed them with senior technical officers who were not members of the union they were required to negotiate with under the direction of the chairs. Mr. Speaker, the hybrid approach addressed the issue of conflict of interest by vesting the leadership in the government-appointed private sector representatives and supported the position that public officers should not be charged with negotiating their own agreements. This revised approach also addressed the union's concerns that the private sector partners were not suitably conversant with the nuances of the public service and were therefore not sufficiently empowered to make operational decisions affecting the agreements. It was the union's view that the old PSNT model frustrated the process and lengthened the time at the table. Mr. Speaker, the union's views on this matter were particularly important, as these views were the outcome of consultation on negotiations process following the 2017 round of negotiations. This form of consultation and the government's commitment to enhance the process was pivotal in setting the initial tone for what proved to be a harmonious round of negotiations. Mr. Speaker, negotiations concluded in May 2023 with Bermuda Industrial Union and the Bermuda Public Services Union for General Staff, and in June 2023 with the Bermuda Union of Teachers. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will already be aware of the government's initial position on the thorny issue of pay. The budget statement recognized that public officers have gone 2 years without pay increases and continue to provide services under difficult circumstances. Further, that increases have been projected in fiscal years 2024 and 2024-25 and 2025-26 will be able to provide an uplift in salaries for public officers. Mr. Speaker, the budget further asserted, and I quote, "Salary increases for the near term will have to be funded by efficiency savings that exceed budget targets and will request our public officers and our union partners to work with us to identify and to implement those savings," end quotes. Mr. Speaker, as expected, our union partners argued passionately against the withholding of a cost of living increase based on the rising cost of living. The partners acknowledged the payroll tax reductions for officers falling within the lower end of the $48,000 to $96,000 tax band would benefit their members, resulting in an increase in their take-home pay. And the government accepted that those at the higher end of the band in other categories may not enjoy the same benefits. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government also accepted that successive years with no cost of living increases meant that government employees' salaries have not kept pace with inflation. Mr. Speaker, the government committed in good faith bargaining and following a fulsome review and many exchanges, the parties reached a wages and salaries agreement, first with the Bermuda Industrial Union, followed by the Bermuda Public Services Union, and ultimately the Bermuda Union of Teachers. Mr. Speaker, while the conditions associated with each agreement may vary, I am pleased to report to this honorable House the principal wage and salaries agreement resulted in the following. Fiscal year 2020-2021, 0% increase. Fiscal year 2021, 2022, 0% increase. 2022, 2023, a 2.25% increase, plus a $700 ex gratia payment. And for the current fiscal year 2023, 2024, a 2.25% increase. Mr. Speaker, in an environment with a global trend during the period of these extended negotiations saw strikes and other forms of industrial action all around this world, this government is pleased that we're able to remain at the table and reach a compromise position that was ultimately accepted by all parties, void of any form of industrial action. Mr. Speaker, this government is proud of the strong bond that we've established with our union and wider economic issues. A relationship payment and the increases for employees for this fiscal year, represented by the three unions, is estimated to be in the region of $19.4 million. That is $4.4 million total over the time period for BIU members, $13.1 million over the time period for BPSU member employees, and $1.9 million for BUT member employees. Identifying the funds to support the new agreement has been a challenge. However, the government is determined to ensure that the cost of living increase commitment falls within the existing budget allocation for fiscal year 2023, 2024. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to thank our public sector negotiating team chairs, Ms. Josine Harmon, Mr. Stephen Todd, Mr. Richard James, and latterly, Mr. Andrew Parsons, who recently replaced Mr. James, to continue with those uniformed officer negotiations that remain in progress. Additionally, thanks extended to those senior officers who accepted the challenge of adding the negotiations function to their already taxing workload. The countless hours of preparation and negotiations requires a significant commitment, and so I'll be remiss if I did not recognize their contributions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Premier. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Social Development and Seniors. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it possible I can have the podium? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise before this honorable House to table the 2022 annual report of the Human Rights Commission as required under Section 30A(1) and 30A(2) of the Human Rights Act 1981. Mr. Speaker, the Human Rights Commission has a statutory responsibility for protecting the rights and freedoms of all individuals in Bermuda. Additionally, as a national human rights institution in Bermuda, the mission of the Human Rights Commission is, I quote, "a Bermuda that honors human rights for all." Mr. Speaker, to place in context the activities shared in the annual report, let me first remind this honorable House of some of the main responsibilities of the Human Rights Commission. As stipulated under the Human Rights Act, the Commission is responsible to develop, conduct research, and arrange educational programs designed to eliminate discriminatory practices, encourage organizations within the community and individual persons to carry on activities which will attract all members of the community whatsoever, and to coordinate activities which seek to forward the principle that every member of the community is of equal dignity and has equal rights, promotes equality of opportunity and good relations between persons of different racial groups, work towards the elimination of racial discrimination and institutional racial discrimination, and use its offices for the resolution and settlement of any complaints or grievances arising out of acts of unlawful discrimination. Mr. Speaker, during the 2022 calendar year, the Human Rights Commission was involved in educational events, the promotion of principle of non-discrimination and equality investigations, and the settlement of allegations of discrimination. I will highlight some of these activities which are detailed in the 2022 annual report, but first we'll share some of the statistical metrics. Mr. Speaker, during 2022, among the individual protected grounds identified by complainants, disability was identified more frequently than others, representing 24% of all identified protected grounds. Combining the individual's protected grounds within Section 22A of the Act, that is race, place of origin, color, ethnic, or national origin, demonstrated a total of 32%. This was followed by sex, representing 10% of protected grounds. Since 2018, this is the 5th consecutive year where race, place of origin, color, ethnic, or national origins, disability, and sex have featured amongst the three most identified protective grounds within a reporting period. Mr. Speaker, during the year, there were 108 intakes filed with the Commission by members of the public. Intakes are comprised of complaints and queries. A complaint is classified as any concern brought to the attention of the Commission by a member of the public who believes their rights have been contravened under the Human Rights Act. A query is a request for information or questions regarding the act or of one's human rights. As it pertains to areas of discrimination, 28% of the intakes concern Section 6.1 of the Act, which focuses on aspects of employment. Among the remaining areas of discrimination which ranked high were harassment within the workplace at 19%, sexual harassment at 18%, and discrimination within goods, facilities, and services at 12%. Mr. Speaker, the Commission experienced an exciting achievement during 2022 in that the Selection and Appointment Committee for Bermuda appointed a first-time panel of 13 members to the Human Rights Tribunal to serve for a 4-term period, 2022 to 2025. Establishing this independent tribunal creates a clear separation between the roles and functions of the tribunal and the role and functions of the Commission. This ensures Bermuda has an independent human rights tribunal that can efficiently and expertly adjudicate human rights cases. Mr. Speaker, the Selection and Appointment Committee is commended for their dedicated efforts in guiding the public application process and ensuring the realization of this critical pillar in Bermuda's human rights framework. Mr. Speaker, the Commission also was pleased to join a virtual panel of disability rights advocates hosted by the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors to address discrimination and disability inclusion in Bermuda. The panel explored various questions, which included, what are the barriers to fulfilling an inclusive agenda? The panel discussed societal barriers to address matters such as prejudice, fear, dated practices, lack of dedicated resources, and reluctance to act. Panelists described these barriers as more disabling than impairments, leading to discriminatory impacts. Mr. Speaker, let me emphasize here that creating any systemic change to progress disability rights in Bermuda requires both collective will and national support. Mr. Speaker, the Commission partnered with the Intellectual Disabilities Unit of the Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute to design and deliver a module entitled Understanding and Protecting the Human Rights of Those with Intellectual Disabilities. This module was part of the Certificate for Intellectual Disabilities Aid Program, a joint initiative designed to provide the healthcare and education team with the necessary skills to support and deliver the highest quality of client-centered care to those impacted by intellectual disability. Mr. Speaker, the Commission was honored to celebrate Human Rights Day with the Bermuda Society of Arts and Work Academy Student Club. The commemorative art exhibit invited submissions supporting Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Human Rights Day 2022 also signaled the start of United Nations year-long campaign to showcase the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by focusing on its legacy, relevance, and activism. Mr. Speaker, I invite this honorable House to read through the annual report of the Human Rights Commission and become informed about the engagements, educational activities, accomplishments, and legal matters that the Commission was involved in during the 2022 reporting period. Mr. Speaker, I commend the officers of the Commission under the leadership of the Executive Officer, Ms. Lisa Reed, for their steadfastness and commitment to the work of the Human Rights Commission and for being trusted stewards of the Human Rights Act. As I close, I encourage the general public to also read the annual report, which is accessible on the website at www.humanrights.bm. The public should also contact the Office of Human Rights Commission at 295-5859 if they want more information about their rights or if they believe they have been discriminated against. The Human Rights Commission stands ready to lend support, and it is determined to fulfill its mission of creating a Bermuda that honors human rights for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. I believe the next statement is also yours, Minister. Would you like to deliver it?
Yes, thank you very much.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I'm delighted to provide this honorable House with an update on the United Nations Development Program, UNDP Joint Program, Building Back Equal with Innovative Financing for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, also referred to as the Building Back Equal Project. This week, June 27th, marked 1 year since the government entered into a landmark partnership agreement with United Nations to participate in this joint program, which supports Bermuda's economic recovery plan. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to remind my honorable colleagues that the joint program, the Building Back Equal Project, aims to diversify Bermuda's economy by supporting the growth of new opportunities for empowering women, our youth, and persons with disabilities to engage in key economic sectors such as agricultural, cultural, and creative industries, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and sustainable tourism. The joint program also aligns with the government's national priorities and its commitment to ensuring the advancement of gender affairs. The program encourages productive engagement for the growth of new opportunities in sectors such as agricultural, fisheries, and cultural industries. Mr. Speaker, the joint program is intended to pilot innovative financing for gender equality to enable Bermuda to not only build back equal post-COVID-19, but also to provide best practice examples to other jurisdictions. These examples would showcase how innovative financing vehicles, digital platforms, and the tools and frameworks of the Women's Empowerment Principles can be leveraged to close the existing financial gaps that women, youth, and persons with disabilities face in sectors such as agricultural, sustainable tourism, and creative and cultural industries. As such, the joint program will improve access to innovative financing and work with the government to create a financial environment that incentivizes private sector engagement in gender lens investment and improve practices that will enhance gender equitable performance management. Mr. Speaker, let me provide a brief summary of events that took place in 2022 aligned with the Joint Program Initiative. My honorable colleagues will recall that on June 27, 2022, the joint program was launched at the Grotto Bay Beach Resort and attended by Her Excellency, the Governor, yourself, Mr. Speaker, local distinguished guests, overseas officials representing the United Nations Joint Sustainable Development Goals Fund, the United Nations Women, UN Women, and the UN Development Program, Multi-Country Office in the Caribbean, the Portland Private Equity Organization. Mr. Speaker, subsequent to this inaugural launch of the program, the next day on June 28, 2022, the UN Women and UNDP delegates held engagement sessions with key stakeholder groups that facilitated the opportunity to learn and understand more about the role and functions of both UN Women and UNDP within the joint program framework. Stakeholders represented government ministries and departments and various representatives from the Human Rights Commission, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, the financial and business sectors, the arts and cultural sector, education, environment, the tourism industry, and youth and sports. Mr. Speaker, on October 2022, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation was invited by UN Women Multi-Country Office Caribbean to identify and nominate women entrepreneurs from its incubator and/or accelerator program and its broader female client base to participate in a business boot camp initiative entitled Yemanja Collaborative, a training workshop for women entrepreneurs. The objectives of the training workshop were to strengthen leadership capacity, empowering equipped participants to scale their business and create meaningful jobs, and build networks and create mentorship opportunities for entrepreneurs in the agro-processing and creative and cultural industries. This training and network workshop was part of the United Nations Self and Triangular Solutions to Overcome Gender and Race-Based Discrimination, and particularly targeted women entrepreneurs in the agribusiness sector or in creative cultural industry sectors that included art, design, music, or film. Mr. Speaker, the BEDC was pleased to recommend the Bermudian female-owned business Buna Gallery, representing the arts and creative industry sector, to participate in training workshop that was held from December 5th to the 7th of 2022 in Kingston, Jamaica. Participants came from all over 20 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, and were all women entrepreneurs looking to grow professionally and personally and contribute to their countries and make a difference in their respective industries. Dana Selassie, owner of Buna Gallery, reports she walked away with a new sense of purpose in being a voice for women entrepreneurs in the creative and cultural space in Bermuda and the diaspora. Mr. Speaker, also in December of 2022, the UN Women advertised and offered 2 consultancy opportunities for persons to help implement the work within the framework of the joint program project. These positions included a researcher to conduct a needs assessment on financial instruments for women-owned MSMEs, and a researcher to conduct a feasibility study on financing mechanisms for gender equality. Later in March of 2023, a 3rd position for a consultant was advertised to support the activities of the Joint Sustainable Development Goals Fund for Advancing Innovative Financing in Bermuda. This position was fundamental for Bermuda since the consultant would be working in Bermuda to undertake the implementation and deliver the joint program. The ministry sent out a press release for each of the UN employment offerings and encouraged Bermudians to apply for job opportunities to work with the UN Women and UNDP. The relevant information about the consultancies was also posted on various social platforms for wider coverage and outreach. The UNDP has since advised that the recruitment process is ongoing in alignment with the policy and procedures of their operations department and is expected to close in a few weeks. We certainly look forward to the onboarding of the consultant and the commencement of the core work for which this joint program in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, in February of 2023, the UNDP Jamaica launched its 2022-2026 country program. The vision of this UNDP multi-country program is to support the governments of the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and Turks and Caicos Islands in reducing multidimensional poverty through gender-responsive, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable social and economic development pathways towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I participated in the program launch by providing official remarks on behalf of Bermuda government and participating in the working sessions. Mr. Speaker, to support the continuity of the joint program, 8 delegates representing UN Women Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean and the United Nations Development Program from Belize, Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos undertook a mission to Bermuda from April 30th to May 6, 2023. The team was supported by partners from the Development Finance Institute Canada, Incorporated, Fin Development Canada, and Portland Private Equity. The purpose of this mission was to re-engage project partners and other stakeholders who participated in the initial engagement sessions held on June 28, 2022, for sustained buy-in and implementation of the project. Validate the draft curriculum and implementation plan for Gender Equitable Finance and Accelerator Program in Bermuda. Conduct training for public sector officers on appropriate financing policies and instruments for gender equality and women's empowerment. Conduct training on gender lens investing for financial institutions and explore other UN Women and UNDP programming opportunities in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, training is essential to the success and sustainability of the joint program. As such, the delegation hosted 2 full-day training sessions on May 3rd and 4th. A training session targeted appropriate financing policies and instruments for gender equality and women's empowerment was provided to the permanent secretaries, technical officers from the Ministry of Economy and Labor, Youth, Culture, and Sport, and the Social Development and Seniors. These officers were informed of the formalities and expectations of the joint program and the role they would play. The second training session was on gender finance and gender lens investing for financial institutions. Participants attended from Clarion Bank Limited, HSBC Bank, Butterfield Group, and the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, whose clients are primarily owners of MSMEs who will benefit from the opportunities provided by the joint program, in particular, entrepreneurs having access to additional capital and reduced risk. I am pleased to inform this Honorable House that 17 persons representing the public and private sectors are now trained in gender lens investing and public financing policies and instruments for gender equality and women's empowerment in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the work of the UNDP Multicultural Office in Jamaica spans 170 countries with the aim to help countries achieve their sustainable development goals. Therefore, several meetings were scheduled with the delegates and government ministries and departments to share their expertise and explore further partnerships and potential for technical support. These included the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors, where discussions centered around the protection of women, young people, and persons with disabilities, the best methods of providing awareness and engaging the vulnerable sector of the population so they could benefit from incentives that are part of the joint program, and the gaps to access to investment capital for MSMEs. The Aging and Disability Services technical team to discuss programming opportunities and resources required to effectively provide the requisite support for persons with disabilities to create a more inclusive Bermuda. A meeting with the Department of Youth and Sport and Recreation to discuss partnership opportunities for the implementation of Bermuda's first national youth policy and national sports policy, and other resources that can be extended to advance sport, recreation, and youth development. Meeting with the Minister of National Security and members of the Emergency Measures Organization to discuss Bermuda's existing national hurricane disaster preparedness and recovery plan, and expanding on resources to improve the existing infrastructure for national emergencies. A meeting with the Minister and Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs to discuss natural resources, safety, and the environment. And a meeting with the Chair and Deputy Chair of the newly appointed Gender Affairs Council to review and give input on its newly developed terms of reference. The meetings with UN Women and UNDP delegates were informative, resourceful, and very much engaging as methodologies, processes, and best practices were shared. The UN Women and UNDP mission to Bermuda culminated with an interview on the radio talk show 102.7 Magic and an interview with the Bermuda Broadcasting Company about Building Back Equal Project, which was aired for the awareness of the general public. The interviews provided a snapshot of the joint program and its benefits for Bermuda, which aims to enhance the economic and social development of women, youth, persons with disabilities, which by extension impacts the entire population. Mr. Speaker, in closing, let me say that I am excited about the progress of the UN Joint Program. The government proudly celebrates the one-year anniversary of a groundbreaking partnership for Building Back Equal project that has transformed the landscape of gender equality and women's empowerment. This is a historic milestone for Bermuda, forging the first ever partnership agreement with United Nations Development Program and UN Women. This government reaffirms its unwavering commitment to gender equality and will continue its efforts to build an economic and social environment where persons are empowered, in particular women, youth, and persons with disabilities in all sectors of the community for a more equitable and inclusive society, which guarantees no one gets left behind. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Ms. Tani Ann Brauber of the UN Women's Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean and Ms. Denise Antonio of the United Nations Development Program and their team for their invaluable contribution in driving this partnership and lending the expertise needed to effect change through the joint program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Minister. Members, that brings us to the end of the statements for this morning. We now move on. Reports of committees. There are none. Question period. There are no written questions this morning, so the questions today will be per the statements that were given this morning. And there's only one statement that has questions generated. And Minister of Social Development, you have a question in reference to your first statement regarding human rights. MP Pearman, would you like to put your statement now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. And good morning to the Minister. Thank you for your statement on the annual report from the Human Rights Commission. In your statement at page 2, you highlight the largest area of discrimination complaints. 24% of discrimination complaints are those on the protected grounds of disability. And this is something that was also highlighted in the annual report by the executive officer's message at page 4. That being the case, what does the government propose to do to improve laws for the disabled in Bermuda?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the percentage indicated was in regards to the intakes of complaints, but the actual investigations, Mr. Speaker, in regards to disability, the number of grounds were only 3, and they were more so indicated in the area of employment. And if colleagues want to read, let me just find the page. Pages 28 to 29, it actually speaks to, I'm sorry, not 28, page 26 to 27, it speaks to discrimination in regards to employment, and the actual issues stemmed around persons with disabilities not being being disqualified for employment by reason of their disability. And so I just want to point out page 26 to members of this House so that they can see. But basically, the outcome of this particular case, the company was encouraged to consider the information received against their internal policies and procedures, and referrals were provided to the Bermuda Employment Council, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber of Commerce for general human resources and small business support. So sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it is just persons in our community getting a better understanding of disability in the workplace. So it's really about awareness and education, which the Human Rights Commission is continuing to encourage. And I did bring to this House, Mrs. Speaker, a national intellectual disability plan as well, which is something the government is also working on for awareness of disability in our community.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Supplementary. I understood the answer therefore to be that the National Disability Plan is the government's proposal to improve laws for the disabled in Bermuda. Would I have understood that correctly?
Minister?
Mrs. Speaker, that is one segment of what we're working on. The National Intellectual Disabilities Plan is one segment of an area which we're working on as it relates to disability.
Second sub?
Yes, second supplementary. You gave a statement to the House Minister in 2021, or at least I believe it was 2021, about disabled access to buildings. I'm just wondering how that legislative announcement is progressing.
Sorry, Mrs. Speaker, I don't recall what the member is speaking to.
Do you want to add a little clarity for it, just to help out?
Yes, you gave a statement to the Honorable House about how you were progressing laws for the disabled in Bermuda, and one of the things that you were looking at, or this government was looking at, was accessibility for the disabled to buildings. And I'm just wondering how that's progressing.
Again, Mrs. Speaker, if that member could specifically speak to what statement he's speaking to, I can't speak to it. I don't know what he's speaking to.
Okay.
I'll move on, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Second question.
Second question.
One of the other announcements in your statement this morning is about the 13 members being appointed to the new tribunal panel. Just wondering how the practicalities of that are being rolled out, or are they rolled out? Is the panel now sitting, et cetera? Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The panel is now sitting.
Supplementary?
Third question.
Third? Okay.
Third and final. You also in 2021 announced proposed legislative updates to the Human Rights Act. That's referred to as well in this annual report. How are those announcements of some 2 years ago progressing?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for asking that question. We are currently working on changes to the Human Rights Act in phases, and we should be hearing of some of those changes in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Supplementary.
Supplementary, yes.
Yes, in the near future, does that mean that we're going to see any legislative tabling in the coming weeks, months, et cetera?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
Second sub or complete?
No sub for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, that's the end of questions for you. Members, that was only a member who'd indicated they had questions to today's question period. So we will now move on. Thank you, members, for your participation. The question period having come to a close, we now move on to congratulatory and obituary speeches. Give me one moment just to reset our clock here. And Premier, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Mr. Speaker, earlier today, we opened up our session of the House of Assembly in a moment of silence to the late member of this chamber, late government whip in this chamber, former Bermuda Industrial Union president, Mr. Ottawell Simmons, JP, affectionately known by all as Ati. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure there'll be other members who will speak to this, but I will certainly like to associate the entire House with the condolences. As we know, Mr. Ottawell Simmons was a revered person inside of our community, and the send-off that we all attended last week, on Sunday past, is a testament to the place of which he held in Bermuda's hearts. We lost a lion of the modern labor movement who challenged a system riddled with privileges for the few, and of course made sure to stand up proud for workers to make sure that they would no longer be working in disadvantaged conditions. And more than the dignity of work, Mr. Simmons demanded dignity in work and dignity from work. There were many speeches that were given, Mr. Speaker, at his send-off, and many persons spoke to the impact of which he had on the lives and psyche of Bermuda. But it should be known and remembered that if it was not for his passionate work, for his fearless advocacy, for his willingness to stand up and to make sure to lead the Bermuda Industrial Union during very turbulent times, many of the privileges that we take today for granted that came about, which were enshrined in law in the Employment Act of 2000, after the Progressive Labor Party were elected for union members, they enjoyed many of those benefits for many years prior due to his work and his advocacy. And now those belong to all persons. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'd like to associate all members of this Honorable House with that note of condolence. And I would ask that this Honorable House do send a letter to his family acknowledging these statements in the Honorable House today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I would also like to do is to ask the Honorable House to also send a letter of congratulations and thanks to Dr. Phillips Curtis Swede, who retired the end of July following an esteemed career as a leader in Bermuda's public education system, and happily associate the whole House. After gaining her higher education, including a PhD and years experience in the United States, Dr. Curtis Swede returned to Bermuda to take up the post of Barclay Institute principal, her alma mater, in 2014. And in 2017, she joined the Bermuda College as vice president of academic and student affairs. And so I wish her all success in her future endeavors. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, wish to associate the whole House. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I acknowledge the next speaker, I'd just like to acknowledge the president in the gallery of today, former member of parliament, Mr. Michael Scott. Welcome to have you here today. Good. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Swan?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to take this opportunity to be associated with the condolences to the family of the late Mr. Ottawell Simmons, and indeed to the Bermuda Industrial Union family, and also the Progressive Labor Party family, who all mourn his passing, and his many friends. Mr. Speaker, I've known Mr. Simmons for many, many years, and my first formal acquaintance with the Simmons family, his family, came attending the Barclay Institute when I was the recipient of some licks for being seen front stage at the protest in 1970 at school sports, when we protested the school sports. And as a first year, my father, who was a police officer at the time, looked through that photo and couldn't help but see me front and center there protesting, which was led by Ottawell Simmons Jr., an upperclassman of mine at the Barclay Institute. But Mr. Speaker, the one thing that I could always say, even though it was for many years that I sat opposite Brother Ottawell in government benches and from a position of party affiliation, I could say I always admired his zeal and passion. And I can remember the one thing he always prefaced what he said: I speak on behalf of workers. And I understand that fully, that when you speak and you are standing up on behalf of those who you represent, you stand from a position of complete strength. And it was certainly his life story is one in which he is very revered today, so much across the board, but that wasn't the story of his life. I think the honorable member, the deputy speaker, put it best in his historical recollection at his funeral, the type of life that he would have had to have led, being villainized for being a person who represented his workers, and also workers who were non-unionized. Because one thing that I could never deny is that when I came back to Bermuda and came and worked as a quasi-government employee the wages were starting to really escalate in Bermuda across the board, and many non-unionized workers enjoyed the fruits of the labors of those who were on the front lines in the 60s and the 70s. The tide rose for everybody.
you,
Mr.
MP
Speaker.
Swan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Let the lady who rose this morning have an opportunity. MP Fergo, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to be associated with the condolences for Otterwell Simmons. Not only was he a great unionist, I would call him a freedom fighter. He was a gentleman, and most importantly, I can call him friend. I was a part of a special group of persons who used to go out to lunch, and I felt very honored that they accepted me as an honorary member, being the only female accepted to that group. And I can say, having sat with all of those soldiers, having sat with them, I was made privy to a lot of history as it relates to the PLP. I was made privy to the way in which they strategized. And I learned some valuable lessons from them. I will greatly miss Audie, and I say condolences to his family, and may he rest in peace. On another note, Mr. Speaker, I would like to give congratulatory remarks to the graduating class of the great Barclay Institute. I have a bias because my grandson, my second eldest grandson, was one of the graduates. It was heartwarming to see so many young people graduate. 98% of their class graduated. You don't see figures like that all over the world. You don't see a percentage rate like that. I'd like to associate MP Swan. Yes, and he is correct. I had a great niece who also graduated from the class of 2023. What stands out is the many scholarships that so many of our young Barclayites were able to secure. Of course, there were many scholarships offered, but of course, many of them can only take the scholarship at the institution that they intend on attending. But nonetheless, it speaks to the scholastic ability of the students to be able to secure scholarships that amount over and above the tune of $1 million in total. And that speaks volumes in terms of what the Barclay continues to do for those young people who walk through their doors. And Mr. Speaker, once again, congratulations to them.
Thank you, member. MP Simmons, you have your 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. And that quote applies perfectly to the late member, the Honorable Otto Simmons. I had the good fortune to meet him very early in life. And it was interesting because my father served in Parliament with him, and he used to always say, this was the greatest premier that Bermuda never had. And I knew Mr. Simmons and I respected him, but I didn't know, he never really explained to me what that meant. And it wasn't until I reached adulthood and began my political career and had the opportunity to interact with him where I understood what that meant. Because at the core was the passion to do right and see right done by Bermudians. But there was also the willingness to take people with him, to understand the direction to get justice for others. He was a person who not just opposed and not just pushed, but he also tried to understand those he opposed and those he pushed against. he had a level of compassion, not just for those he fought for, but he also attempted to build bridges and understanding with those he fought against. There is it's a very special quality to him. He spent a lot of time mentoring many young MPs within the party and many aspiring MPs. There is a level of greatness and a level of humility and a level of vision that few have displayed and few can possess. And we can all learn a lot from Brother Ottawa Simmons. I am truly grateful to him for all that he and the members of the Bermuda Industrial Union did to move Bermuda forward. And I am thankful to his family for allowing us to share his precious time on earth as he fought for the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Simmons. Does Deputy Premier, would you like to have your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would like to be associated with the remarks of perhaps less condolence, but celebration of the life of Ottawa Askew Simmons. As the member who followed him in Pembroke East, I always felt a special sort of duty to emulate the impact that he gave to the constituents of that area. He served for over 20 years as the MP for that area, and there was not a household that I didn't visit that didn't have warm and heartfelt gratitude and affection for him in the area of Pembroke East. He was one of many other esteemed members who served as representatives for Pembroke East, and he certainly represented a high caliber of leadership that was given to the committee during that era and set a standard of leadership for all of us to follow, whether it be as a parliamentarian or certainly as a leader of the Bermuda Industrial Union, as, and I would argue, the most impactful modern union leader that this country has ever had. So we should all have gratitude for his service in this House, but also the service he gave to our country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Opposition Leader, would you like to have your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also associate myself in regards to the comments made to the Honorable Ottawa Simmons. To me, he was a genuine hero. Mr. Speaker, as you may remember, earlier this year, the Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast recognized a number of people, and Ali was one of those persons. And at that luncheon, a tribute was read by Ms. Ronnie Burgess of the Union. I was so moved by the tribute, Mr. Speaker, that I said that I was going to nominate him to be a national hero. And so the next day I called Ronnie and asked her for a copy of her speech so that I could begin the process. And so I began the process of making him a national hero. But a week later, the BIU called me and on behalf of Ronnie, and she says, Mr. Simons, given his service to the union, can we nominate him for a National Hero Award? And I said, of course. And so I relented and passed the baton on to him. But be that as it may, we've changed our hero status criteria, and our friend, Mr. Ottawa Simmons, was not be able to achieve a national hero status during his lifetime. But he indeed is a general hero to most of Bermuda. As you know, he was relentless, persistent, determined, skillful, and yet kind and gentle. As you know, he was responsible for providing rights to our labor, our workers, working class people. They got holidays as a result of him. They got maternity leave benefits because of him, and the list goes on. And so, again, I will go on record that saying we in the opposition have considered making him a national hero, and we were working with the union to make sure that it happened. but unfortunately he passed before it happened. I met him personally when I was whipped. He was whipped under the PLP and I was whipped under another party. And we had so many talks, and the labor persona was not the person that I met, because I knew of Artie from his labor movement activities. But when I met him, I found that he was the kindest gentleman.
Thank you, honorable member. Does any other honorable member wish to make a contribution at this time? Minister Ferbert, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to also be associated with the remarks in regards to Honorable Member and Brother Audi. I did have the opportunity to serve with Brother Audi on the Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast Committee. And just like MP Levita Booker spoke to her experience, I could also speak to the similar experience in regards to the meetings and how important and vital the members, particularly of the Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast, knew that getting together in a social context to have meetings and discuss and communicate was vital to the success of any relationship. And Brother Audi always brought his smiles and jokes and advice as it related to politics. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I did get to spend with the Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast Group, and particularly Brother Audi. So just wanting to share my condolences to his family. I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate all the graduates. Mr. Speaker, this is a time of graduations across our public and private school systems, where we see lots of persons transitioning to new levels, particularly for Bermuda as we transition, persons transitioning into signature schools, persons transitioning into parish schools, persons transitioning to Bermuda College, into the employment sector, and also overseas institutions. So wanting to take this opportunity, I did have the opportunity to attend the graduation of Gilbert Institute, where I was a guest speaker. I am an alumni of Gilbert Institute and St. David's Primary, and also the Barclay Institute, where I can declare my interest. My son graduated from the Barclay Institute. So just a big congratulations to all the graduates in Bermuda. And I do want to also take this opportunity to congratulate all the Special Olympians. We would see that, I'll associate the whole house in regards to the Special Olympians. Mr. Speaker, I just want to share that sports is the only area in which we can evaluate visually someone's skill. Any other sort of subject, you would have to have an intimate look in regards to someone's skill area. And so it's an area which we could relate to in great detail. Just a big congratulations to them.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Minister Campbell, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the Hamilton Princess on the successful completion and unveiling of their business meeting center. This happened yesterday. It's a fresh, flexible, and first-class facility, and it's a great addition to the hospitality offering. I want to thank Mr. Tim Morrison, the general manager, his assistant, Roy Dow Naverson, their staff, the Green family, for their continued investment and reinvestment in the Princess facility, and also the contractor D&J on excellent work. This is important because it reinvigorates and brings our product up to par with what is to be found in other jurisdictions. So once again, I would like congratulatory remarks to be sent to the Hamilton Princess on their successful unveiling of their business meeting center. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Ming, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and
Good
listening
morning.
audience. First of all, I'd like to be associated with the comments for Brother Otto Simmons. I know that some of the benefits that we enjoy today are because of his hard work and determination, and in most cases, his sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to send congratulatory wishes to the 2023 Dame Jennifer Smith Future Leader Award winners. We celebrated our award ceremony this year. This was our 17th year, and it is awarded to students in the Eastern Parish in St. George who have demonstrated leadership skills at an early age. And from East End Primary, we had Zaire Coddington and Shiloh Mello. From St. George's Preparatory School, we had Kenzie Denbrook and Cruz Simon. So we had 2 boys, which was a bit different. From St. David's Primary, we also had Christian Fox and Adalja Bryan, 2 boys again. And for Clearwater Middle School, we had Tyree Fox and Alexis Harvey. What was also made the ceremony special, Mr. Speaker, was that the speaker for the event was Maximilian Santiago. And he is a young man who talk about more about what you can do versus what you can't do. And he's a first-year student at Purdue University, and he is studying meteorology and aviation management. But he was a 2015 recipient of the exact same award. And so what we're seeing is the persons who've received the award are now coming back or entering university. In some cases, some of them have actually finished university, and even in terms of this ceremony, are giving back. I'd also like to extend congratulations to a young woman by the name of Courtney Jeffers. She happens to be the daughter of Antoinette and Charles Jeffers II. She entered yesterday Morehouse Medical School, something that I'm sure most of us know would be a prestigious step that she takes, and we pray for her as she goes on her journey. I'd like to associate MP Terrell with that. And also congratulations to the graduates of East End Primary and St. George's Prep School, but all of the graduates on the island. There have been many graduations, and there's been much to celebrate, Mr. Speaker. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Ming. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Famous, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and colleagues and the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, start off on a good note. As MP Fogo said, Berkeley had the graduation, and 98% of the S4 class graduated. Only 2 males were not yet successful. So we want to congratulate our alma mater. I want to speak in particular of 2 young men from Devonshire, Eamon Robinson and Rosai Garland. They both excelled. One excelled in getting multiple scholarships. One excelled at the point that it was kind of sketchy whether he would graduate, but he applied himself throughout the year and walked away not just with his diploma, but the Principal's Cup for Perseverance, which speaks to what we need to do as people, stand by our young men, even when they need help. Mr. Speaker, on a sad note, I'd like to bring to the House and the people of Bermuda the passing of the former Prime Minister of Barbados, Lord Ashton Sandiford, who passed last week, and also the former Governor General of St. Kitts and Nevis, Governor General Tapley Seaton. He passed yesterday. They both did their part to bring the Caribbean away from colonialism to where we are now. Joining the chorus of platitudes for Uncle Adi, a lot of people know what he did for the country and the unions, but some of us in this house, Brother Derek especially, know him, the man. And he took me on his wing years ago. But there's 2 things that stand out in my mind, Mr. Speaker. Number one, he told me, as politicians,
You stay with the people, and the people will stay with you. Do not detach yourself from the people. And what's more applicable to those of us from Taunton, we used to be looked down upon, Mr. Speaker. And he said, even when they look down upon us, we have to rise each other up. And that's what he did, not just for people from Backertown, but as MP Swan said, he rose up the black middle class of this island. And for that, we shall be eternally grateful. And without even an official thing, he is our hero. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank, thank you, MP Famous. Does any other MP Simmons Wade? I saw you rise first. You have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker
Good morning.
and members of the parliament, government, the public. First of all, I'd like to associate myself with the remarks in regards to okay. The remarks that were made in regards to Audie Simmons. I've known Audie for 40 plus years as a very good friend of my late husband, Frederick Wade. I used to sit and listen as they were at the house with the kitchen cabinet. I learned much. I never envisioned that I would be coming into politics, but I certainly benefited from those opportunities. Audie may have been small in stature, but he was a giant among men. So thank you, fearless leader, Audie Simmons. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend congratulations to the graduates. But without the counselors, without the teachers, and without the education officers, they would not have been so successful. So I would like to congratulate all of those individuals who are actually retiring at this point, and there are quite a few of them. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to congratulate all the individuals that got scholarships and awards this year. And on behalf of all of those people, including my daughter, I'd like to thank the clubs, the organizations, the businesses, and government for providing scholarships for our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Minister Weeks, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to start off by associating myself with the condolences for Brother Audie Simmons. Don't know where to start. Most people has touched on the greatness and the impact that he has made. Before there were single seat constituencies, there are dual seats. And it was Brother Audie and Brother Nelson Bascom in Pembroke East and Pembroke East Central. When they split up, our deputy leader followed on and took the seat of Brother Audie Simmons, and I had the honor of following on with Brother Nelson Bascom. It doesn't dawn on me that these giants of man laid the foundation for men like myself in Pembroke. When we walk around and greet people and people greet us, and things may appear to be easy, but they're not, because there's men like Brother Audie and brother, I see my counterpart in Pembroke East smiling. My Brother Audie and Brother Nelson laid the groundwork for us. When I became the MP, Brother Audie summoned me to his house, and I say summoned me because when he sent a message to my mama that didn't give me a choice, that I had to come and sit with him. You know, so he told me about the struggle, he told me about himself, he told me about Brother Nelson, told me some things about Brother Nelson I didn't know about, how intricate and together they were in dealing with the struggles of our people. And he every now and then he would have me come and talk to him, and he would guide and sometimes cajole, but most times it was always a kind word, you know, just to keep me going. So it's going to be definitely sorely missed, Mr. Speaker. But before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring congratulations to the principal, Ms. Cannon Smith of Victor Scott Primary School. This past Monday, she had a special assembly for her community partners. She honored us. I was one of them. Victor Scott is in my constituency. There was people like big brothers and big sisters, even like church, fish and things. But I'm really want to highlight the involvement of the BPS. Miss Inspector Karima Flood, Inspector Derek Golding, Sergeant Raul Mean, Sergeant Shonette Edmondson, and PC Kimberly Spring. Mr. Speaker, these officers make time for the students at Victor Scott almost every single day. And I just want to congratulate them in my 3 minutes.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Is there any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Adams, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. and
Morning.
Good morning to the listening public. I will, if you will indulge me, I will use this.
Colonel, you want to play
Nice.
music for us all this morning?
If you will indulge me, I'll use these 3 minutes to actually be a PLP 3 minutes, actually. So first, I wanted to wish to associate myself with the condolences to Brother Audible Simmons as well. I didn't know Mr. Simmons at all, but I knew many people that did, and certainly I am in awe of the legacy that he has left. Certainly a man amongst the people, and if I was to use the opposition leader's words, a true, genuine hero. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to congratulate my cousin, MP Kim Swan, for his recently winning or accepting an award by the Bermuda Sport magazine for his contribution to golf. And certainly it does not take long if you ever speak to the MP or about his passion with golf and his stories of where the sport has taken him. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and tell him that it was, and congratulate him. And then speaking of magazines, I was actually in an office and I picked up the latest Bermudian magazine. And in that magazine was a bunch of Best of Bermuda awards. And so naturally my eye was drawn to the most effective politician. And so I wanted to congratulate Minister Tanae Furbert for winning that award. In particular, persons on multiple times, in particular, persons on our side of the aisle can attest to her hard work and dedication. And so certainly well deserved. And as the Premier acknowledged, she's now won this multiple times. And so I'm just putting it out early and let her know that I'm coming for her. Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge that 2 days ago would have been the 84th birthday of former leader of the PLP, L. Frederick Wade. When we speak of legacy, when we talk about legacy in terms of Audible Simmons, I just wanted to acknowledge another giant as well. Mr. Speaker, as many of us know and feel, November of '98 does not happen without the groundwork of Freddie Wade that he put in. And I just wanted to be crystal clear that the party, even as one of the youngest members, will keep his memory and legacy held high. Thank you.
Thank you, MP. Government Whip, would you like your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning
Go
to
right
all. Mr. Speaker, firstly, let me associate with the condolences already sent to the family of Audible Simmons. I certainly want to say personally that Audible was one of my mentors. Very quietly, he directed me in many issues concerning workers. So I certainly appreciate him for that. And in fact, he even twisted my arm to sit on the hotel pension plan fund so that it could have some direction because he knew I had some background in pensions. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have condolences sent to the family of a couple of my constituents. One is the passing of Isabel Irene Tucker of Spice Hill, a very supportive family of not only myself, but the Progressive Labor Party. And I would like to give special condolences to her two daughters, Iva and Kenesha, and certainly her grandson, Peter, who seems to be very fond of talking to me all the time. The other family is the late Linda DeRosa from Pierman's Hill, and I certainly, again, wish to send condolences to that family. Mr. Speaker, if I don't do what I'm about to do next, I think the House might be doing condolences for me next sitting, so I'm going to use up the rest of my time to thank a teacher, a very special teacher, who is my neighbor, She is sits on my branch executive. She always canvasses with me and gets mad when I don't take her. She has put in 34 years in the teaching. I see everybody looking to be associated. I will do that individually. She is Jameer Simons as I said, she's my neighbor, a very hardworking person. So I'd certainly like to associate the premier, the deputy premier, her school. As I said, if I didn't do this today, Mr. Speaker, I know what it would be like for me next week. So again, congratulations to my teacher friend. And let me also congratulate the other teachers. She's actually retiring, so that's why I brought that up. But she's not lost to the system because I'm going to push her to come out as a sub. So I think we will still see her in the system at times. And I also just want to congratulate teachers in general. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP, Government Whip, Sotero. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Deputy Speaker.
Thank you,
have your
Mr.
3
Speaker.
minutes.
Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to access how to send congratulations to Mr. Edwin Wilson. I'd like to associate Minister Weeks with this. He celebrates his and my cousin Cole and my cousin Robon and the Premier. Edwin celebrates his 88th birthday on Sunday. Edwin worked for government over 40 years. Last job he was a labor relations officer. Edwin was tough, but he was fair. And we certainly missed him when he left, when he retired. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to talk about Adi a bit. Adi Simmons, my mentor, my father in politics, my father in trade unionism. Adi reinforced in me what integrity is. I can recall being in his office one time and he ordered some goods for the union. And the supplier in the state says, call him back, and he had him on the blower. And he says, Mr. Simmons, I have your goods. Do you want me to devalue the duty, the cost, so you can pay less duty? Adi says to him, whatever it costs, you put it on the invoice. We don't mind paying our taxes. And that's what really reinforced in me the integrity that Adi has taught us all at the BRU, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also would like to thank all the members for their kind words this morning about Adi, certainly fitting. And he was our whip, as you know, for many years. As my cousin John Barrett said, when he became whip of the other party, he learned from Adi. He watched him and he learned very, very well. Adi was a good teacher. And if I happen to do anything wrong, you can blame Adi, right? But let me say, Mr. Speaker, but let me say that certainly, again, on behalf of the BRU, we want to thank everybody for the kind words to Brother Adi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Dunkley, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too would like to add my condolences to the passing of Ottawell Simmons. When I first got involved in actually coming back to Bermuda and start working, Adi was standing up for workers and their rights. And our paths crossed in the House of Assembly when I got elected and Adi was already here. And for many, many, many years, he represented not only the workers of Bermuda, but the people of Bermuda. And I think we should reflect on the commitment that this great man had in service to the people. He stood up, he stood strong, and he stood for many people who didn't have a voice. And while oftentimes we were on different sides of the aisle, Adi was a man you could always respect, because even in his disagreement with your position, there was a respectful dialogue. And I would like to take this opportunity to send my condolences to the family and the friends of Ottawell Simmons on the passing of a man who certainly played his part in making Bermuda a better place. And one thing I will reflect on Adi is, often before you actually have the pleasure of shaking a person's hand or meeting a person, you form opinions based on what you might see, hear, or read. And so when I had the opportunity to first meet Adi in person, and then to spend some time with him in the House of Assembly and work with him, I was amazed at how cool he was at all times. And if we would take many things from the passing of Adi, but one thing I will always remember is even in the heat of occasions, Adi was a cool person, a cool character, and that is to be appreciated. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to send condolences to the Joins family of Cable Hill in the passing of their mother, Gloria Joins, who passed a few days ago. She follows a husband who passed just a few years ago. A good Bermudian family, and Miss Joins was somebody I always enjoyed climbing the hill to speak to because she always had something to say, and it was well worth the time to climb that hill and to listen to Mrs. Joins. So to the Joins family, condolences in the passing of your mother. And on a more pleasant note, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to send congratulations to our swimmers in the CAC Games. The entire team who went to the games, and I would associate the entire house to that. But just last night, we had 2 medal winners in Miss Harvey and Miss Moore. And so congratulations to the team, and congratulations to Senator Ben Smith, who coaches the team. Swimmers are doing very well, and congratulations.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make? MP Simmons, Scott Simmons, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, honorable colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to rise in this House and join my honorable colleagues in this House as we send our condolences out to the family of the Honorable Ottawa Simmons. I like the fact that the Deputy Speaker highlighted the fact of his parliamentary contribution in this House. He was not just certainly a landmark as it relates to, and a person of height as it relates to him being over at the Union and throughout our movements in Bermuda. He certainly made his impact on this honorable House, and he should so be remembered with so many of our other colleagues. Mr. Speaker, when I joined the Bermuda Progressive Labor Party in a number of different roles, I appreciated when each of those roles were punctuated by members within the party who provided support. And those senior members taught us how to act, the things that were of importance, and also highlighted to each and every one of us the importance of integrity, of keeping our word. And as a result of that, I appreciated them, of which the Honorable Adi Simmons was absolutely one of those. He certainly provided me a great support. And I distinctly remember when taking on the reins of being the chairman of the party, I asked the Honorable Ottawa Simmons if he would come and look into a matter as it related to a disagreement that was had within the confines of that party. I can say safely that he didn't rule in my favor. I thought that if you selected someone, they would rule in your favor. They did not. And Adi did not rule in my favor, but it created in me a level of respect for those who agree and those who don't agree with the positions that you take. He was an honorable man. He was a wonderful parent. He was a fantastic figure in our country, and he is absolutely a role model that we must continue to emulate in our behavior in this House, and the way that we handle our unions, and the way that we talk to each other, and the way that we deal with each other. It was high in integrity, and it was indeed worth the mention and the admiration and the things that we say in this honorable House today. Mr. Speaker, your time is important. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. Does any other honorable member wish to make a contribution at this time? No other member? Before we move on, I'm going to rise to make a couple of comments myself in regard to a former colleague, Adi, as we all refer to him. I had the privilege of saying Uncle Adi because of a family connection on another side, but it was Uncle Adi. And on Sunday, we heard stories of the heroic leader that he was, the outstanding contribution that he done for this country. And we all could go on and on about that. But today I want to take a approach to talk to the man that I knew, how humble he was. And Adi was always, and I should say Uncle Adi, was always comfortable, no matter what setting I found him in or what setting you saw him eat, even in confrontational situations, or situations where some of us may not be as comfortable. He always seemed to find a place there. And there was the humbleness of the man that allowed that to happen. You know, at the funeral on Sunday, a few members got me referred to how he called him John Boy or Johnny Boy. He always, from the very beginning, called me Denny Boy. And it wasn't one of those names that I was all that favorable with, but Uncle Eddie got away with it, and I never questioned him about it. And even up until the last time I ran into him in the street, it was, "Hey, Denny Boy, how's things good?" And we were talking, you know, always had good times. I can remember the Labor Day activities. And some of you maybe remember back then that Uncle Eddie, when he was president, used to have the Sunday activities at his house. And we'd sit off after we've gone down and set up the stalls and activity for the Labor Day events at Sunday. We'd end up at his house, and it was just a fabulous opportunity to sit around and see him in his personal setting, and just how comfortable he was with no matter who walked in. And he just made you feel like this was your place to be that day. And no matter who it was, he showed up. But that speaks to how humble he was. We also heard on Sunday how easily he cried. And some of the family members tell stories of how he cried at different funerals and things that he had attended. Well, MP Adams, you brought in our former leader, husband to MP Simmons, who aide. You brought him in your comments. I'm going to end on a little story. And MP Simmons, Wade, you may or may not remember this, but at your husband's funeral, I was joking with the deputy speaker at the funeral this week for Adi that, you know, I'm not a pallbearer for Adi at his funeral on Sunday, but I carried Adi in St. John's already. On the day of our leader, Frederick Wade's funeral, Adi was one of the pallbearers when we got into the graveyard. And the funeral, the graveyard, Mr. Simmons Wade, was way up on top of the hill there. Adi was in front of me. I was at the end. I think Nelson was at the beginning. It was Nelson, Adi, myself. As we started up the hill, and because it's so humble and personal and emotional, Adi just lost it. It spoke to how close he and Freddie were in their personal relationship. They were true friends. And he just lost it. He literally fell apart and was on the coffin crying, just broke down. And all of a sudden, we weren't carrying two bodies now. One body, we were carrying two, because we had to carry the weight of Adi leaning on the coffin, just boiling and broken down. We couldn't say, Adi, get out of here. You know, we just had to let him lay there, and we carried this extra weight. But that was speaking to how humble Adi was. He didn't care that he was out in the crowd of all these people, and that was a huge funeral. He didn't care who was there. He was expressing how he felt about the loss of his dear friend. But that speaks to my friend, Uncle Adi. Let us always remember what he done for this country and the significant impact he made in bringing us to who we are as people in this country and the standards that he set for us all to fulfill. Thank you. Members, we'll now move on. The next item on the order paper is matters of privilege. There are none. Personal explanations. There are none. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House for matters of urgent public importance. There are none. Introduction of bills. You'll note that the order paper indicates there's none. However, we're going to seek the indulgence of the House to allow the Premier to introduce a bill at this time. Members, do you have the Premier have the indulgence of the House? Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the indulgence, honorable members, Mr. Speaker. I move that the government bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2, Act 2023 be placed in the order paper for the next day of meeting.
Thank you. No private bills, no motion, no notice of motions. That now takes us to the orders of the day. And the item to be discussed at this time is the second reading of the Child Daycare Allowance Amendment Act 2023 in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled the Child Daycare Allowance Amendment Act 2023 all read a second time.
Are there any objections? There are none. Continue, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to introduce a bill entitled the Child Daycare Allowance Amendment Act 2023. The purpose of the bill is to amend the Child Daycare Allowance Act 2008 to allow for the responsible minister to prescribe a maximum gross annual household income with respect to an application for child daycare allowance, to provide categories of such incomes for the granting of awards, and to clarify that an application for an award is based on an applicant's gross annual household income. Mr. Speaker, on June 16th, 2023, the honorable members of this House were made aware that the current eligibility requirements for the child daycare allowance is a maximum gross annual income of $55,000, with the maximum award being $800 per month for an eligible child. On average, the monthly cost for child daycare is $1,100 per month, which means that parents or guardians must fund an additional $400 per month to satisfy the total fees. Reforming the structure of awards will assist households to cope with the rising cost of services provided by these facilities. Mr. Speaker, the adverse effects of the global pandemic has placed financial stress on businesses, and as a result, they are forced to alter their operations to remain gainful entities in this economy. Generally, this means that families will be required to cover additional expenses as costs of goods and services are increasing more and more. Additional support for this service is paramount to sustaining households and promoting early childhood development. Mr. Speaker, this government recognizes that families are vulnerable to the economic atmosphere and require assistance wherever possible. Eligibility requirements needed to change in order to lend support for families. The new legislation provides a maximum gross annual household income for eligibility in the following categories. $65,000 equals a maximum monthly allowance of $900 per child. $97,000 equals a maximum monthly allowance of $700 per child. $130,000 equals a maximum monthly allowance of $500 per child. This uplift in support is designed to maximize the risk of families having to decide between child daycare services and employment. Protecting the continuance of early childhood education is important for the stability of our economy. Negative scrutiny child daycare allowance amendment regulations will be introduced and affect these new categories, and that particular regulation will be laid after the debate of this bill. Mr. Speaker, the amendments to the Child Daycare Allowance Amendment Act 2023 falls in alignment with the government's overall plan to strengthen social protections within the economy. You would note that we have already made amendments to our Financial Assistance Act by allowing persons who have timed out after 7 years to continue to receive a reduced benefit. Mr. Speaker, this change not only improves a household's ability to ensure that their child is in daycare allowance, but it also increases the purchasing power of those households who are grappling with the cost of living within our society. Changes like this, Mr. Speaker, is what sets the Progressive Labour Party apart from other political parties in the island. We have made it our commitment to the people of Bermuda to ensure that we expand social protections. We have made it a commitment to expand labor protections, but it speaks to the human-centered approach to policy development that we actually have, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not only are we making this change for today, but there are more changes to come. And so we're doing it in a very deliberate manner, the way in which we're making these changes that ultimately improve the lives of the citizens within this country. The next changes that we will make in this particular house, which is in alignment with the framework of the social protection changes that we will make, is increase the pool of persons that would actually be eligible for financial assistance. Right now, if a person has over $500 of assets in their financial assets in their bank account, they are not eligible for financial assistance. We're going to amend that so it moves up to $5,000. And $5,000 is important because if a person does have a little bit of savings, but do find themselves in hardship where there's a reduction of income, $5,000 is not going to last long in this economy. And so we want to ensure that we provide households with a greater level of stability prior to them going into a position where they drain all their assets and they have no further assets to support them in maintaining a decent and dignified quality of life in this economy. The other change that we're going to make is to ensure that a dollar in is not a dollar out as it pertains to child support. So we only calculate 50% of the income received to child support so that the other 50% can go towards supporting goods and services to the child. Mr. Speaker, we will also allow gifts to be provided to members on recipients on financial assistance. You would note that there could be emergency situations that take place, and us as MPs at times would want to give support to members of our constituency who are on FA. However, based on the current rules, you are unable to provide a gift. For example, if you go to a constituent's house and their fridge is broken, and that constituent has children, they can't afford a fridge because they're unable to retain cash. But because who we are in our hearts, we want to provide a level of support, even to the extent of purchasing a small fridge to help that family. Well, this change allows you to do that. We also know that there could be severe medical emergencies that the total coverage may not be covered by the health insurance plan that the individual is on. And as a result, this allows individuals to also receive gifts through mechanisms such as GoFundMe, where those gifts can then be utilized for the specific area of providing medical support. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that there is a gap for persons who need sudden hardship benefits within our society. And so we will also be seeking to make a legislative change to allow households to receive a sudden hardship benefit for groceries, health insurance, medical expenses, death expenses, rent or mortgages or utilities for individuals who find themselves on sudden hardship that is due to recent unemployment, a natural disaster, death of a household member due to domestic violence or a public health emergency. Mr. Speaker, if it's one thing we learned from the pandemic, is that we need to ensure that we have adequate social protections in place to respond to crises that our families may find themselves in. And so, Mr. Speaker, we will be moving forward with a benefit of $1,500 that is available for individuals that find themselves in sudden hardship for a 3-month period. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased about the work that this government is doing regarding expanding social protections, expanding eligibility requirements, increasing benefits to what I'll consider to be some of the most vulnerable in our society. A lot of the changes we're making supports able-bodied individuals, Mr. Speaker, but also it supports low-income earners, it supports our seniors, and it supports our disabled population. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that Cabinet has approved changes to the table of allowable expenses, which means that the table of allowable expenses which govern the benefits provided to all recipients of financial assistance, those benefits will increase. And as a result, every single recipient that is currently on financial assistance will receive increased benefits, whether it be increased medical benefits, utility benefits, food benefits, rent benefits, medical supply benefits, benefits for utilities. Each and every one of those recipients will receive enhanced benefits to better support them in this particular economy. When we talk about what is the ethos of the Progressive Labor Party, it is founded on the bedrock principles of us providing additional social and economic protections for the people of Bermuda. And I think with the amendments we're making today, the amendments we have already made, and the amendments that we will continue to make, we are demonstrating that in action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? The opposition whip, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the Honorable Minister for bringing this legislation to the House. I would echo a lot of his sentiments in terms of the protection of the vulnerable amongst us, but I'll put that into my contribution as well as my questions to him. Mr. Speaker, we're here today to debate the Child Daycare Allowance Amendment Act 2023, which is amending the Child Daycare Allowance Act 2008. That piece of legislation, that act, also outlines what the regulations can set forth. So this entire framework is to provide an allowance to eligible parents and guardians to meet the cost of child daycare, which the minister has helpfully pointed out averages at $1,100 per month. Mr. Speaker, we've spoken ad nauseum, or certainly at length, as it relates to social safety nets in this honorable House. And we constantly have to speak about it, because if we're not here for that, I don't know what else we're here for, to be frank. The most vulnerable amongst us are the people we will need to take care of. And as I've said before, it's my impression, certainly in all the reading of history I've done, that a society is judged more so on how it treats the most vulnerable amongst it. Mr. Speaker, but as every piece of legislation comes before, it has to be scrutinized, and we have to have a question about the cost benefit of all the actions of any government. And Mr. Speaker, I think that one of the things that child daycare allowance provides is access to early childhood education. Mr. Speaker, in the absence of ensuring that our children are put into committed, dedicated educational environments, you can only imagine what would happen thereafter to the wider society. We cannot have parents, for all intents and purposes, having to withdraw their children from early childhood education because they can't afford it, and therefore they wouldn't be able to work because they'd have to look after their children. And we would just see that cascading impact into not just our wider society, but also into our wider economy. Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that we have to make sure that these things are taken care of, and they're taken care of seriously. I follow the minister's words on deliberately. And to that end, the opposition supports this bill and has some further questions for the minister. It was the minister had mentioned when he started speaking about I want to say, financial assistance developments that are coming down the road about able-bodied persons. I think one of the things we have to be very clear about when we talk about social safety nets, Mr. Speaker, is that just because a person is able-bodied does not mean they are without need. And that is a difficult reality that we face, not just in Bermuda, but all over the world. And so I just want to develop on that thought a little bit and make sure the minister knew that certainly the opposition is not of the opinion that this country is without need and that there are those in this country who should not be neglected when they experience that need and hardship. I was a patrolman some years ago, Mr. Speaker, in the Bermuda Police Service, and we had occasion to go up to St. Monica's Village. And I recall it was a normal call, to be frank. We had dozens of those calls all the time. But I went into an environment that shocked me. The need as it related to the children in that household, and in fact, that particular complex I was in was shockingly evident. I later on, as I moved on through my career and worked with more and more senior constables, sergeants, and the like, and I realized a part of the job was assisting people in those sorts of circumstances. And I later on worked with some teachers as a school resource officer or assisting school resource officers when I was a community beat officer, and realized how many people in our community actually contribute money to families in need. And it always stuck with me, Mr. Speaker, because for all intents and purposes, I grew up on White Hill, and there were people in need, and the community worked together on those matters. But I had never, I was a Somerset kid, to be fair, Mr. Speaker. I hardly ever came down. And to see what I saw was bracing. We cannot neglect the people in need in our community. It is simply unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, with that being said, I'd like to go into the minister's statement of 16 June, from which I would like to read. So with your permission, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. On 16 June, the minister said, and as he just said in his ministerial statement, the purpose of this bill is to allow the minister to, number one, prescribe the maximum gross annual household income in respect of an application for a child daycare allowance. Number two, provide categories of such incomes for the purpose of granting awards. Number three, clarify that determination of an application for an award is based on the applicant's gross annual household income. I'm going to break these down, these three purposes, because I think that there is a more efficient mechanism by which to accomplish these things. The first purpose of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to prescribe the maximum gross annual household income in respect of an application for a child daycare allowance. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, this is what is the most income the parents or guardians can earn before being eligible for the award. Again, being mindful, Mr. Speaker, there must, for all intents and purposes, be a cap on how much that family can bring in to then be eligible for the award. And that's set out in the regulations as well. But by virtue of this already being enshrined in law, specifically in the regulations, this includes the amount that the qualification is for, as well as the amount of the award. This demonstrates that the minister actually already has the power to increase the amount of both the award as well as the qualifying criteria. Now, the minister actually said in his 16 June statement that the current allowance does not adequately cover this growing cost and warrants reforming the current child daycare allowance program. Now, I agree with this, but what the minister could actually do right now is, by way of an amendment to the regulation, actually increase this award. So on the first purpose, that's why I raised that I think there's a more efficient way, and in fact could bring this matter to a close and successful implementation faster than the current method. The minister went on in saying in the 16 June statement that the ministry will implement a new tiered financial award specifically for child daycare services. And the minister just spoke to those tiered systems again in his brief. This touches on the second purpose of the bill, wherein the minister said, provide categories of such incomes for the purpose of granting awards. And it is true that the regulations as they stand today have no tiered or categories for which these qualifications take place, and therefore the amount of award that is given. Equally, what can be said, though, is there's nothing in the Principal Act or regulation that says you can't implement a tiered approach. It only says the maximum amount of the award as it is today. So it's clear that the regulations provide the director of the department with the ability to vary the amount of the award. To this end, I think that, again, the minister could bring an amendment to the regulations and get this assistance to the families actually today. Clarify, the third purpose of the bill is the minister said it will clarify that determination of an application for an award is based on the applicant's gross annual household income. Mr. Speaker, when we get into committee, I'll actually speak to the swapping of the definitions that are enshrined in this current amendment act. And to that end, I will leave that for committee. But what I definitely say is that insofar as getting assistance to families as quickly as possible, this is something the minister can do by way of amending the regulations. And in fact, the minister acknowledges this in his statement. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the members of this honorable House should expect subsequently to have tabled amended child daycare allowance regulations to introduce and affect the new tiered rates. So it's quite clear that the mechanism by which to make this change or to increase the relief and assistance to families is actually the regulations. To that end, Mr. Speaker, I would question the minister if having the power to increase the allowances by way of amending the regulations, why bring an amendment to the actual act instead of bringing that relief more quickly? To that end, Mr. Speaker, I close my presentation. I thank the minister for bringing this legislation, and I look forward to a fulsome debate in the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Richardson. Does any other, Minister Wilson? Yes, Minister Wilson?
Thank
You have
you,
the floor.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll recall approximately 2 months ago, the Honorable Minister Hayward informed this Honorable House of this government's intentions to make further provisions and amendments to the financial aid initiatives so that we can continue our objective and our goal of strengthening the social protections for Bermudians and those in need. And Mr. Speaker, you'll note that part of that framework also, as enunciated by the Honorable Minister, contained reforms to the current financial assistance program that would again provide social and economic benefits and support to those families in need. And the child daycare allowance in which we're debating this morning is just one of those examples. But you may also recall, Mr. Speaker, that the enhancements that were spoken about by the Honorable Minister included but not excluding the expanding eligibility, allowing recipients to retain partial income from their work, adding new funding schemes to allow the recipients to receive gifts, as well as creating short-term funding for sudden hardships. And Mr. Speaker, some of those enhancements, again, that are designed specifically with the sole objective of ensuring as best as possible that Bermudians do not fall through the cracks and that we provide the proper support and safety nets for individuals. And one of which I am so happy to be able to discuss and debate this morning, deals specifically with greater access to child care. And again, Mr. Speaker, these enhanced protections for individuals and families in need will make sure that eligible Bermudians have the full financial awards and support that is required to prevent them from falling through the cracks. Mr. Speaker, let me just spend a few moments speaking about the importance of child care and early childhood education. Mr. Speaker, many books, academic research, and even songs have been written and sung about the importance of children and that children are our future. And we as legislators, I submit, must do everything that we can to support that particular position. And I'm glad to hear that the opposition have indicated that they are supportive of this very critical piece of legislation. And if I can quote former US President FDR, and he once said, quote, we may not be able to prepare our future. We may not be able to prepare the future for our children, but we can at least prepare our children for the future. And so the natural question I submit, Mr. Speaker, is what does that look like? What can we do as legislators, of parents, et cetera, to prepare our children best for the future? As a mother and a former educator, I believe that the answers can be found in the foundations of early childhood education. And what we do not want is a situation where parents cannot afford to provide the basic needs to their children, in particular as it relates to early childhood education. I remember, Mr. Speaker, and this was many years ago, when I was looking at early childhood education for my children, it was at a time where you almost registered your child depending on the facility, depending on the facility that you were looking at from birth. And fortunately, the circumstances were such that I was able to afford the facilities that I wanted. And this bill allows for those parents to not go broke or not to have to make choices, important choices as to what bills are going to be paid, and ensuring that their children receive a Class A education at an early age. And the benefits of that are as follows, Mr. Speaker. And again, this speaks specifically to the importance of early childhood education, which, if you believe in that, you would obviously believe in the reasons behind this legislation to ensure that all parents have equal access for their children to early childhood education without breaking the bank. Those persons in need, Mr. Speaker. Some of the, all the evidence suggests, and I'm going to rely, Mr. Speaker, real briefly on evidence that's from the OECD, WHO, as well as the World Bank, that speaks to the importance of early childhood education. Obviously, a good quality early education is essential for supporting the child's development. And almost all of preschoolers who have been able to be impacted by the ability to have and receive early childhood education end up developing higher expectations as well as rewards, as well as developing learning expertise. And it helps to decrease the risk of individuals or children that are developing learning difficulties if they are able to be afforded with the early childhood education. And the World Bank, Mr. Speaker, has actually done a number of studies, and they've indicated that for preschool age children, access to quality childcare and education drives better nutrition and better health and academic outcomes. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, early childhood education improves social skills. It allows children to engage with their peers, learn how to listen, how to share, how to express their emotions in a healthy way. And of course, these are skills that are critical for child's development that can be brought on for future skills in future years. Early childhood education also is linked to greater successes in life, as well as in particular, Mr. Speaker, it allows parents the freedom to study and or continue with their working experience. One of the major benefits of this is to allow the freedom to give parents to continue working or to be educated without the benefit of being able to put your children in childcare. Those provisions as it relates to advancement of work or continuing with work in addition to perhaps participating in further education would be greatly curtailed if you did not have somewhere proper and safe for your child to be during the day whilst you're at work or studying. Mr. Speaker, research also from the WHO shows that early childhood education offers screening for health and behavioral issues. Oftentimes it is the teacher that may have observations of the developmental milestones of that child, and they will be able to articulate what their observations are to the parents and or the community nurses to ensure that a proper screening takes place. These are all, Mr. Speaker, I submit, the benefits that have been well documented and supported by evidence with respect to the benefits of early childhood education. In addition, as the honorable member that just took a seat indicated, that this early childhood education does positively impact society, Mr. Speaker. It has multi-generational impacts as well, because it ensures as best as possible that children will learn to grow up and contribute positively to their communities and to their societies. So, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the examples I think that warrant the support for this legislation, in particular as it relates to the benefits of early childhood education. However, there's also benefits as it relates to the economic impact of persons having the ability to access early childhood education. Whilst we see that childcare is very important to all families, it's particularly critical for those of lower incomes, those with where children may be disadvantaged, women and single parent families. Because again, as I indicated, the ability to access childcare allows parents to continue to work, which allows them to increase their hours of work. It helps to reduce the moving them out of poverty, as well as improving the family and the children's long-term life chances. Excuse me. So, Mr. Speaker, this initiative and this bill that we are debating this morning obviously has quite a number of benefits, not just from the child's perspective as it relates to being involved and enrolled in early childhood education, but also as it relates to the economic benefits. And Mr. Speaker, obviously, when parents are able to work and to contribute to their livelihood, it certainly has a positive impact on one's mental health. If a person is able to go to work and know that they have access to childcare and the child is in a safe environment, then that allows the parents to be able to participate in the economy by working, paying taxes and the like, and being more productive. Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important to note that oftentimes the child-minding responsibility does fall on the mother. And in circumstances, perhaps of two-family home, if childcare is not being made available because it's inaccessible because of the financial burden, then oftentimes it's the mother that is at home caring for the child whilst the father is working. And that, of course, creates further gender pay gaps where the mother is at home and not participating in the economic support of the family, but the father is, simply because they are unable to access childcare at an affordable price. Mr. Speaker, the OECD, if I can just quote this real quickly, in 2020, their policy brief on labor, employment, and social affairs, their key findings are as follows, and I submit these are also applicable to Bermuda. High child care costs are one of the factors contributing to inequalities in child care use across income gaps. And in the European OECD countries, children under the age of 3 in low-income households are 1/3 less likely to participate in early childhood education and care than those of high-income households. And it also goes on to report, Mr. Speaker, that child care cost can substantially weaken employment incentives for parents. On average, across all OECD countries, a low-paid single mother who takes up full-time work loses almost 2/3 of her work earnings to child care costs, taxes, and the loss of social benefits. So, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, I think that it's critically important that the bill that we speak about today, which is supported, and I'm very glad that it is supported by all sides of the House, provides for the benefits of the family to ensure that the children have access to childcare, and that the reasons that I've enunciated insofar as the importance of childcare will be preserved for all individuals that are in need, whether they can afford to pay childcare or not. If they have a need, this bill allows for the minister and the discretion to be able to provide basically a tiered system to ensure that persons are able to avail themselves of the financial support so that the childcare provisions can be made available to their children. And again, this is a perfect illustration of the government's commitment to ensure that the social protections that are needed for all members of our society, particularly our children, are provided for, and that we are pleased, and I am particularly pleased to be able to stand today to support this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Speaker.
see you on your feet, so you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to thank this minister for bringing this legislation to this House. And as I heard the speaker from the opposition, I think if the minister had the authority to implement the changes as he's proposing today, he would have done it. Because as you see, this minister in particular, this minister has brought many changes to give financial assistance to our people. And I know if there was any loophole in the legislation for him to have done it, it would have been done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, children are very important to all of us, and particularly to this government. And even though the economy is the way it has been the last couple of years and improving as we speak, this government has not stopped, has not stalled in giving our people assistance, because we realize that our people have to live. And so that's been very important to us, even during the pandemic. You saw this government just make the funds available so our people can live comfortably, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill that the minister brings today, it's one that increases the inclusion of people that could not get the benefit before. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, that in order to qualify for the benefit prior to this is $55,000 per household. Now, which disqualified a lot of people. In fact, right now, I think it's about just over 100 people getting this benefit. And it certainly will increase because we realize that people out there are suffering right now. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you check around, to get in a nursery today, it's going to cost you at least about $300 minimum a week. And just imagine somebody, a single parent, particularly a female, because that's most times who has to labor with this situation, making $54,000 a week and got 2 children. I don't know how they make it, Mr. Speaker, because they won't be able to get this benefit. Now, as you know, Mr. Speaker, this benefit started in 2008. And what this minister has done is increase the amount from $800 to $900. That's a 12.5% increase to try to assist our people. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is, I think, one government, I think it's preschool nursery, they call it up Happy Valley. I think the rate is probably around about $400 a week. And so I think there's a criteria that that you have to meet in order to pay that rate. Because if you got someone making $100,000 a year, I don't think they will qualify to get in that particular nursery. They shouldn't qualify before Ms. Smith, who's making $54,000, Mr. Speaker. But this takes it up to $130,000 per household, Mr. Speaker. Make it even more available to those parents out there that are struggling. And you know, even if you got a single parent household making $70,000 a week and got 2 children, and I'm saying $70,000 a year, and that single parent house, they're still struggling because they don't meet this threshold. But you can't cover everybody because one thing people will say, but some people will say, those that really don't think what the objective is, well, you got some people who shouldn't get it, they're getting it. Well, there is no foolproof program in the world that you can put in place that those that shouldn't get it, get it. There's no one, because if it was, we would have known about it. And that person who can bring that one, I'm sure many countries will thank them and probably reward them with a vacation free. Because we face it, England faces, United States, everywhere faces this situation, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, one thing I would say, Mr. Speaker, during the 50s and 60s, I went here, during that time, probably you and Terrell was around, right? We thank God for grannies, Mr. Speaker, because in those days, grannies didn't work because they had about 8 children. And so if you had a child, it was always somewhere to take little Johnny, right? And that was, you just drop them there, grannies could feed him and everything else, right? Today, the grannies are younger, more energetic, they're going doing yoga and all that type of stuff. They ain't got no time for that, Mr. Speaker. So that is the change in times, fortunately or unfortunately, Mr. Speaker. But the government understands that. And this minister, Minister Jason Hayward, let me repeat, Minister Jason Hayward has, as busy as his ministry is, has come to this house and say, look, we got to address this here. We can put something in place. And I'm sure, and let me repeat, I know if he would have had the authority, it would have been done yesteryear. And he says, well, I know he's looked around. I know Jason's going to look to see if he can do it. And when he found that he couldn't do it, he said, I got to bring something to this house. And it's done. And if we look at all the other programs that he has brought here to assist people, not trying to get people off in a sense to try to take out those that shouldn't have it, his board here, one where we can increase it for people, because we know just by canvassing and walking around this country, we know more people need it, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're done. But even in some of the programs that he has in place, he's attached a training program so to try to get you off. And what this government has also done, they're saying about, okay, Derek, you got a job, but you're not meeting it. So we're going top you up. We're going to help you out. Because in some places, and I'm sure here, that if you had a job, that disqualified you also. But because you have a job, it doesn't mean that you can afford the food and where's Wayne? It's going electricity and all that type of stuff. You know, so this government is saying, "Wait, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix this." You know, at once upon a time, Mr. Speaker, before this minister took over, you can only stay on financial assistance for 5 years. He's increased it to 7 years, and then it's put a little rider in there that if you expire at that time, I'm gonna give you something to keep you going for another 3 months before we get it, before we can regularize it. So this government is doing all it can to assist our people in these difficult times, Mr. Speaker. You've seen this government increase benefits to our seniors for prescription drugs. This is what this government has done, Mr. Speaker. All of that. We've given discounts to seniors. Go and get their car license. This government is all about trying to take care of its people. As Adi Simmons would say, stay close to the people and they'll stay with you. As Kim said earlier, Kim Swan, you know, Adi always said that. And that's what this government is doing, is serving our people. At the same time, we've got to balance the books. We understand that too, Mr. Speaker. And I think the finance minister is doing a great job in doing that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't think people know that we've got over 2,000 people on financial assistance, you know. We have them, many of our seniors, Mr. Speaker. And then as the minister has brought here earlier, that our dependence ratio on, when you compare seniors to those in the workforce, in the year 2026, it's going to be about 44%. That's high. And I think the world average is probably around 34. And we have to try to, and that's why the minister says we need some jobs. When he says we need jobs, common sense would tell you that, hey, we need investment too in order to get jobs. But some people read it wrong, say, oh, he's trying to bring all these people in here. Well, what do you think? The minister is very astute. He's very intelligent when it comes to knowing what he has to do in order to get these workers in here. We all understand that. Because if you don't do that, your pension's in trouble. So the minister is addressing this as he is addressing and making people more people to qualify for this allowance, Mr. Speaker. And we realize that if you don't bring the child up right, and it doesn't mean that, and when I say bring up right, some people don't have the financial capability to do that. And as we understand, this government understands that if the children don't have the proper foundation, they have to miss a meal a day. That's not the way we want our children to be brought up. And that's why this government thinks it's very important to take care of our children so they can, the parents can have the luxury of feeding them, give them 3 squares. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you can remember, and Terrell can remember, years ago, well, yeah, the oldest, you know, Terrell said I'm picking on this Speaker, but we appreciate his age. He looks good for his age, right? He looks good. But, you know, once upon a time, you went to school, Mr. Chairman, and Johnny lost his sweater. And Johnny goes, Mama lost my sweater. Mama had his scratch and hole saying, how am I going to buy Johnny a sweater? Because every penny is accounted for. But if you had the luxury of some funds, he said, Mary, take him downtown, get him another sweater, whatever. That is comfortable living. And that's what we're trying to do, because children will lose their sweater or their coat or whatever. But what our aim, our objective is to make it comfortable that mama can go downtown to get him another sweater. We don't want that child go to school and his curl or his curl. That's not the objective of it, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are very cognizant of the importance of our children having comfort in their homes, going to school with comfort, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's why the minister couldn't wait to get this bill here so he can give those families relief ASAP. I applaud him for that. And I applaud this government for looking out for our children, because if the foundation is not right, what do you think is going to happen 15 years from that time? If the family is not right, the country is not right. And this government is very important to us to make sure that our families are right and we're given the assistance we're needed and we're necessary. Again, Mr. Speaker, if we had a foolproof system to put in place, we would have had it there years ago. But there's nothing to stop us from trying to help those that are genuine in need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy. Do you want to?
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy, just yield to
Yes.
MP Fogo.
It's I
You
know it's 5
have
minutes
you have
to the
about
lunch
8
break.
minutes before. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, the member who just took his seat touched on many points. And so what I would like to say, because I'm not going to touch on all those points, but I want to say this is an example of where a minister has been very considered in his approach to how we can meet the needs of our families. And it is true that when we take care of our young ones, our future leaders, we are indeed securing our future. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say this is a part of a systemic approach, because you just can't do things piecemeal and just address one part over here and forget about all the other parts that fall into making a wholesome community. But what is evident, and we live in this society, and we see persons who do make what one might consider a very healthy salary. However, we also understand and appreciate we live in a society where the cost of living is extremely high. And so the approach applied in this daycare allowance is one that I said in the beginning is a considered approach, which meets the needs of families, because we know it's not what you make, it's what you have to pay out, right? And many of us living in this society have to pay out quite a bit of money to sustain our households. And I have seen many a family where even though the hardworking individuals, they sit there and determine whether or not they forget about work, try and rely on something like financial assistance to take care of their young ones, because in currently the way things have operated, if they take in one more dollar, they find themselves in a situation where they lose the assistance that they need, and they can't help the young ones except to go on financial assistance. So here's a situation where the minister has said, you're not going to be penalized for working hard, because as a government, we know we need everybody, capable body we can, working. That's how societies take care of themselves, through the earnings coming up, through the taxes, etc., from people's wages. The more people that work, the more in the government coffers. But here's a situation where we are figuring out how to keep our able-bodied employees in continuous employment while at the same time, as a government, providing funding to secure the family and ensure that people are allowed to move forward, and to ensure that they're not being penalized because of the salaries that they make, to ensure that our young ones are getting the assistance that they need in schools so that they can grow up to become competent workers, citizens in their own communities, and so that they can be loyal citizens and give back to their community the same way that their parents, etc., are doing so. So I want to thank the minister for his ingenuity in bringing this legislation today, and I hope that when I'm out hitting the roads canvassing, that I hear from some of the parents that I've heard from, where they are saying, thank you, this is a good thing, I can work, I can take care of myself, and I can be proud, a proud parent, knowing that my family, I can sustain my family and my household. So Minister, thank you.
Thank you. Member Deputy, you want to take us to that break time? Yes. Yes. Very much so. Your mic wasn't on, so people
I'm
couldn't
sorry.
hear that. Yes.
So, Mr. Speaker, I move that we adjourn to 2 p.m.
Are there any objections? There are no objections? Members, the House now stands adjourned.